the next thing we're going to go into is going to be the best exercises in my book. And obviously this isn't like a mutually exclusive list, but some of the best exercises to gain mass and build bigger legs. Now, a preface to all this, before we go into talking about this, right? Because I'm sure you can start guessing, like high bar back squat, duh. If you're sitting here and you're saying I have issues and I'm doing these exercises and I'm still having issues, then there's clearly a disconnect between how you're doing those exercises and how they should be done to promote muscle growth and size. So when you're listening to this next session, I want you guys to really just focus on not just hearing the exercise, but hearing how the exercise is executed, the mindset behind these exercises, and what I'm thinking about, what I tell my clients, and what I'm looking for when we're doing these exercises. So the first one, the high bar back squat. Notice I said high bar. I'm not against the low bar entirely, but if you're looking to gain leg mass, build up these quads, the high bar back squat is going to keep you in a more vertical position, which is going to cut down on the amount of hip flexion and send your torso forward. So in terms, it's going to keep your vertical chest position. It's going to force more knee flexion, which the quad works to extend the knee. So we want to obviously put in a flexion to make the quad work. That's why I'm choosing the high bar back squat. Now, when we're doing this, there's a couple ways you could take this to the next level. If you're struggling with that, you could elevate your heels. You could wear lifting shoes. But the biggest thing is when you're doing this is we want to make sure that the descent portion is coming. Obviously, you're going to have hip flexion, but really relying on that knee flexion, getting down nice and deep, feeling that stretch. So I like doing 2 to 3 second tempos in like the first month cycle of a hypertrophy cycle. I might add a pause at the bottom, and then the second cycle I might just keep the eccentric, no pause, and then maybe I'll do full. That's kind of how I would progress that in my hypertrophy program. That's the biggest thing. You could also do different techniques like a tempo, where you just tempoing throughout, maybe 2 to 3 down, 2 to 3 hold, and then coming back up. I find tempos is great for beginners to just reestablish a better squat patterning in general. The next one here is the leg press. And I know there's kind of two camps here. Some people love it, some people don't. I think the leg press, it gets a lot of bad rap because people try to ego lift on this thing. If you can put your feet at the lower end of the platform, and then space your feet accordingly, the narrower they are, if you can achieve that narrow position and get down to depth while keeping your lower back flat, perfect, right? Obviously the wider it is, you're going to start loading the glutes and hips more. Some people that's what it is because they don't have the mobility. But I find that a lot of people, they fail to control the sled on the way down, or they start to use momentum and they kind of cut their depth, right? So when we're doing this, the reason we put the feet lower on the platform is because it's going to force more knee flexion. Again, that's the emphasis of the leg press, is that we want to get the quads. And really getting down there, making sure at that bottom depth that you're keeping your lower back flat. We don't want that lower back bubbling up there. I really like using the leg press, not for like my heavy work, right? I guess not for my lower rep work. So my squats, I typically stay within like a 5 to 10 range, no matter what cycle I'm in, except maximal strength. I don't like going higher than that on squats because I start to just roast out my back instead of my legs, which is insert then the leg press. So I might follow the leg press up in my squat program, and I'm doing, anywhere from like 8 to 15 reps to 10 to 20 reps. So I might, maybe it's 4 plates on one side. My first set, I get, 14 reps. Second set, I get 12. My last set, I get 8. The next week, now I have a goal that I can beat, right? And maybe the next week I get 14, 13, 14, right? I found a second wind. I could either say, okay, third week I'm going to increase another, my volume, and I'm going to increase one set, kind of increase my overall training volume there, or I could just increase weight, and then I just repeat it. So there's a couple different variables you can do with that, and that's why it's cool for hypertrophy training, is you can maneuver and manipulate variables based on kind of how you're feeling. So you feel strong that day, cool. You can go up, a little bit more weight, match your reps, as long as you stay within those ranges. So that's kind of how I use a leg press. Next, the front squat, right? So the front squat, I like doing the front squat. Obviously, it shifts the weight in front of you, so it's an anterior load, so it's going to force you even more to stay in a vertical position. The more vertical your back angle is, the less the hips can go out and back behind you, so it's going to, in turn, force more knee flexion, right? Which obviously the quad extends the knees, so that's what we're working on there. This is something big, obviously, for Olympic weightlifting. It's very skill specific to the clean, but you could do it in the front rack. You could do it hands crossed, whatever your mobility allows for. The biggest thing is that we want to stay vertical. We want to have really the knees bending there. Obviously, you're going to have some hip flexion, but we want to really focus on knee flexion. When I'm doing this, again, I don't do a lot of high rep front squat. I kind of stay within the 5 to 10 range, just because anything after that, I start to get, the core starts to get fatigued, the upper back gets fatigued. I start losing positioning before I get the quad limitations. And that's kind of a big one I think about exercise selection, is when I'm pushing intensity, am I failing because the quads are giving out, or am I failing because other things are giving out? And if it's other things giving out, then I typically stay in that heavier range. If I can really push the quads to failure and higher rep, then that's kind of where that fits. So another option here is the hack squat. Some gyms have it, some don't. I love the hack squat. It's kind of like a front squat, I guess front squat positioning, but it's a machine, but it's kind of like a front squat leg press in my book. It's great because it sets you back, gives you great feedback. You're kind of you get your feet on the platform. I like putting again my feet on the lower end of the platform. To really force that knee flexion. The further out away from you, the less knee flexion you're going to get. So you're probably better off dropping weight and getting your depth and moving your feet back under you. I've even seen people kind of stack plates so that because if you bottom out the sled, it might not be your true depth. So this is big for like shorter lifters. You can stack your plates there and you can get your full depth. That's great because it locks you in position. Like you can't compensate whatsoever. You can't shift weight to your hips. You're either coming up or you're not. So I love the hack squat. That's something that I can use 5 to 10 reps all the way up to 10 to 20 reps depending on it. So that's a great exercise if you have access to it. Another one here, it's super common everywhere, is a leg extension machine. I obviously don't really train that heavy on this. I don't like loading any single joint exercise with a lot of weight in terms of like low rep range. So this is something that maybe I'll use in warm-ups to get my quads, activated. I might use them at the end just to really get a lot of blood flow in there and get some metabolite push to really drive the growth. So that's something that you could superset with other things, maybe unilaterals. But I'm a big fan of doing these. This is great for people who want to just add some extra leg volume throughout the week. They could hit their shoulders and arms like we said earlier, and then they could add 4 or 5 sets. Maybe doing like 10 to 15 reps, really focusing on just getting that quad going. Next one, Bulgarian split squats. This is kind of a fusion one for me because it's something I always do. I feel my quads, the next day I feel my glutes and I feel my hamstrings. So it's kind of a good all around kind of it kind of fills the gap between the two. It helps bridge that gap. That's a better way to say it, bridge it. Unilateral, right? So it's going to help you attack any discrepancies you have between your left and your right in terms of your leg strength. It's going to help attack that. So this is something that, again, like I can load this thing up in the 5 to 10 rep range, right? Like the other day I was doing Hatfields, Bulgarian split squats. My front foot was elevated, and that all that does is that allows me to get even greater knee flexion, so even more emphasis on the quad. So you can always do that with like a lunge, reverse lunge, anything. You can always elevate the front foot. I had 200 pounds on there, and I was doing, sets of 8 to 10 on each leg, right? It was heavy, so I was training that, right? So you don't necessarily, with unilateral, need to go always super light. I wouldn't recommend going less than 5 reps, and I would recommend if you are doing that, you're in a rack so that if you bail, it's not like you're going to, kill yourself. So that's what I recommend. But again, like I wouldn't try and test maximal strength on a unilateral work, but you can still lift relatively heavy. So, earlier I talked about I don't like putting conventional deadlifts as my hamstring specific work, right? I think conventional deadlift is a great exercise. Like I love it. It's great. I do it. But when I go to my numbers, I'm looking at, because conventional deadlift is more of it's kind of like how do you quantify a clean or a snatch volume in terms of what muscle group it works, right? Even though obviously it's a posterior dominant, you're still working your back, you're working your rectors, you're working your hamstrings, your glutes. But I like to really use the stiff leg deadlift, right? Where obviously it's much more hamstring And this kind of goes the same with Romanian deadlift. I use these two interchangeably depending on the cycle. So it's a little less knee flexion. So your knees are a little straighter when you start. And you're really, in turn, you're forcing that hamstring to stretch, because the more you bend your knee, the less tension on the hamstring. So I'm not saying it's like fully locked out, right? But it definitely has slight bend in it, and it's staying constant. And you can do this, just warming up or just standing up right now. If you stood up and you push your hips back with a little bit of knee bend, and then you keep your hips back, lower back flat, and you try and straighten your knees, you're going to feel that stretch and that tension in your hamstrings. And finding that is what I'm looking for when I'm doing a stiff leg or Romanian deadlift. Now that being said, I still train these pretty heavy, so I like to train it within that. I like to train heavy on the hamstring, 5 to 10 rep range. Anything higher than that, I really, personally speaking, I feel my hamstring, but I start to feel other things too. So it kind of goes back to that stimulus to fatigue kind of deal with, am I attacking the muscle? So I typically stay within that 5 to 10. Sometimes I'll go above 10, but typically it's that 5 to 10 rep range, and I'm really loading those hamstrings up. And there is some, when you look at the hypertrophy guides or anything, there is some, in terms of heavy hinge movements, the hamstring is a fast twitch muscle fiber, so typically those can respond a little better to heavier loading. Following that up with seated or lying hamstring curls. I only have access to the seated. I know there's two camps. Some people hate seated. Some people hate lying. Some people love both. Research just kind of shown they both can work. I've seen some research out there saying actually, I got an argument with somebody who said lying was better, but in terms of hamstring activation, I saw some research saying that seated was better. Regardless, whatever it is, do what you can do. This is an exercise I like to drive metabolic fatigue, or a metabolite fatigue, not metabolic. Metabolite, so within that muscle, getting that fatigue, high fatigue without, and high muscular fatigue, high muscular stimulus without a lot of stress to the other muscles, right? So like if I was doing high rep deadlifts, there'd be stress all over the place, CNS, the back, everywhere. With the seated machine, and this is great about machines, is you can push that intensity, you can push that stress and stimulus without, blowing up your back, because then, tomorrow when you got bent over rows, or some other, even like a, overhead press, your lower back's not going to blow up on you. So that's why I like doing the lying hamstring work. And last one here on this list, this is something more for like, the athletic training facilities, strength conditioning, or just gyms that, that have that. Maybe they only have a squat rack, no machines, or maybe even people who maybe can't squat heavy right now because their back just kind of tightens up. I have a couple clients like that who, came to me with some back issues, but they're athletes, and we're kind of in that weird in-between stage where we're getting stronger, we're improving movement, we're feeling better, but we just can't quite put that loading on yet. And I really like using sled pushes, right? Because by not being in that vertical position, you're obviously more bent over because you're pushing the sled. You're changing the stress on that lower back, so the force is shifted a little bit. I really like my favorite go-to would be like 4 to 6 sets, 2 to 3 minutes in between, because I'm not here to like try and do like a fitnessy workout. I'm here to just push a really heavy sled, 45, 60 seconds, so whatever that distance may be. Sometimes I'll say it's 50 yards, sometimes I might go 70, depending on what it is. But I kind of want to stay within that range there. And we just push as heavy as we can while still keeping the sled movement. It's not a race. I'm not trying to go fast with it. I'm just trying to keep constant tension, focus on the legs driving. And if you've ever done something like this, you will know you're doing it because it is nasty and your legs will balloon up and you might get a little just fatigue in general, obviously. But what's cool about this is that it's a lot of concentric stress, so it forces a lot of blood flow in there. It doesn't have a lot of eccentric stress, which is great for, I was going through a period where I was dealing with some knee, quad, tendonitis stuff, and it's basically just a bunch of terminal knee extensions under load without having the eccentric. So it's great for that type of process too. So those are, some of my favorite kind of go-tos, and I'll stick with those for most of my training over the past couple of years. It's just really been that, just changing some variables, changing exercise order, and just kind of tracking things over time. So I kind of threw out you guys a lot of different stuff on, why people might be struggling with not gaining leg mass, having the chicken legs. All jokes aside, a lot of people struggle with it. I struggled with it. And then I offered you kind of some of my 10 top go-to things here that if you're not doing the vast majority of those, I'm not sure what else you're doing. I mean, you could be doing crazy little variations, or maybe you are doing it and, you're not loading it properly, you're not performing reps properly. Those are all things to look at. But I want to just discuss with you guys a sample 2-day leg hypertrophy split that I would do. So, this is something that, remember we go back to the training volumes, right? So this is like the week 1, and I'll kind of show you how you could progress this. But the training volumes, I'm trying to hit, anywhere between 14 and 18 total sets of quadriceps throughout the course of the week. And then the hamstrings, maybe a little lower just because, if I'm doing my cleans or pulling from the floor or my conventional deadlift, I don't count that into that volume because I kind of know I'm getting additional outside. So I'm typically in that lower range of maybe 12 to 15 instead of 14 to 18, relatively speaking, to the quads. So day 1, I like to, day 1 and day 4, so it's usually Monday and Thursdays, are my lower body splits, right? So I'll go Monday lower, Tuesday upper, Wednesday off, Thursday would be lower, Friday upper, and then Saturday I might kind of fill in with accessories or maybe do a little more upper kind of body shop work. So that's what I do. So when I do it is I don't make a 50-50 split on my volume in terms of I'll do half quads and half hamstrings on both days. I find a little better that I try to do like 75% of my quad volume on day 1, the other 25 on day 4, the second leg day. And then, on day 1, I'll do 25% of my hamstrings and then more of a hamstring focus on the next day. And I find that, I can still get the volume in, but if I just did 50-50, I might not get the stimulus and that growth and soreness that I'm kind of looking for. But that's not to say you couldn't do 50-50. That's just how I split it. So day 1, right after I warm up, I might, I'll start 4 sets of 5 to 8 reps of my high bar back squat, and obviously work on everything we talked about. Then I'll look at, so that's my quad focus. Then I'll go and I'll shift over, kind of give my quads a quick break. I'll go to my good mornings, and 4 sets of 5 to 8. Like I said, I like doing a lot of the hinge work, whether it's good mornings or things from the floor, the 5 to 10, 5 to 8 rep range. Then I go back and I'll do, like in this last program, I had leg press, so I did 4 sets, 10 to 15 reps, right? I was, like I said, I was using a weight that, if I hit 15 on that first set, I stopped, but I realistically only had 1 or 2 reps in the tank. So obviously by the 4th set, I was maybe luckily to hit 10 or 11, and I'll kind of progress from there. Then I went over to unilateral, just for more of a, trying to really get that quad, to get a little hamstring glute love in there. So I did 3 sets, 8 to 10 on that. And then I burned out with leg extensions, doing 3 sets of 20 to 30 reps. Right, so for that day, my overall lower quad volume, 4, 4, 3, so that's 11. And then Bulgarian split squats are always difficult because it kind of counts for everything. So let's call it like 11 or 12 sets there, and 4 sets of hamstrings, plus 1 or 2 from the Bulgarian. So that's kind of my day 1. My day 2, my second leg workout, I would do stiff leg deadlift, right? 5 sets, 5 to 8. I get a lot of good stimulus from stiff legs. It's one that works well for me, so I like to really rely on that heavily. Then I follow up with 5 sets of hamstring curls. Again, higher rep work, 10 to 15. And then I would, so there's my 10 sets of hamstrings coupled with 4 sets from the other day. That's 14. I'm in my range. And then I would round out, I had 11 or 12 quad sets on day 1. On day 2, I really like hack squat, or even like, a heavy, you could do a heel elevated dumbbell squat. I have that as a variation for some of my clients who don't have a hack squat, but obviously you're limited more on, can you hold a heavy, dumbbell? Can you get like 110 pound dumbbell? Can you even get it up here? So I like the hack squat for that reason, but I'll do like 5 sets of 10 to 15, get kind of that moderate range in there. And that will bring my total quad volume up to, 15 to 16 sets in that first week. From there, the second week, I'll kind of keep everything the same because I'm dealing with ranges. I can kind of keep the weight the same, and I can push towards the upper end of the range. If I kind of was, maybe a week when I was a little lighter and I was already consistently at the top end, I might just increase weight. I could, the third week, maybe I increase, I do one more set of back squats. So now my overall volume is just up, one set in that week. So I'm, instead of hitting 16, now I'm at 17. And then once I get to a point where I'm, my volumes are towards the end, right? Maybe I'm getting 18 sets of quads and 15 sets of hamstrings, and I'm still getting results and stimulus. At some point, I have to know I'm kind of towards that end, and I can't continue to, do it week after week, and now I'm doing 27 sets of squats, right? It's just 27 sets of quads. It's just not feasible, and it's not suggested because you're going to really start to overuse and wear and tear your body. So what I might do is I might put a slight deload in there. If I'm still getting results from a certain movement and I'm not getting any joint pain from it, I'll keep it in there, and maybe I'll reset and I'll kind of restart the cycle with heavier weights and kind of repeat it. Sometimes, like when I'm doing, leg press, I'll get great stimulus for like 6 weeks, and then that, the 7th week after a deload, I'm just not getting the same stimulus. I might just swap it out, for 6 weeks. Maybe I put hack squat in place for it and I move leg press to the other day. It's just a matter of maybe changing exercise order or changing exercises can really help you out there. So I know there's a lot of information on this. I hope it was helpful for you guys to hear kind of, the mindset that I kind of go into, the resources that you can use to help yourself gain leg mass and size. So again, make sure you guys subscribe to this channel. Share this with somebody who struggles with gaining leg mass, whether you just want to call them out and say they got chicken legs, or whether you're really trying to be a great lifting partner, great coach, great friend, and help them out with some of these things. Because I know it's fun and games to say chicken legs, but this is something I really dealt with, and I to this day I still feel like I want my legs to be bigger, I want them to be stronger, and this is something that whether you're trying to gain size or strength, these are principles you can use. And if you're a strength athlete, you can use these in your hypertrophy program. In your more off-season or base phases to really start to allow yourself to grow. So that's all I got for you guys today. Excuse me. Make sure you guys, again, leave a review. Let me know what you guys think. Comment. But until next time, you guys can check me out on Instagram at Mike J. Doer. YouTube, this will be up there if you aren't watching already. And I'm actually going to try and start putting this stuff on Spotify in terms of the videos. So just stay tuned on that. But thanks for being a part, and I'll see you next time.